Okay, so in 1996, Nash and Hall left, and their last night in the WWF was the MSG House Show in May. After the main event, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Razor Ramon, and Diesel all embraced and hugged, breaking kayfabe. The old-timers in WWF were outraged, as was Vince, though apparently, based on what I've heard, Vince okayed it. Keep in mind that back then they still tried to protect kayfabe, as such faces and heels weren't allowed to travel together. So the fact that they broke kayfabe in the middle of the ring was a pretty huge deal. Shawn Michaels was the champion and the top guy in the company at the time, so they couldn't afford to punish him. And since Hall and Nash were leaving the company, that left Triple H to take the punishment. He had to apologize to the locker room and the agents and basically jobbed out for a few months. The thing is, now people look at his time jobbing as this huge long thing, when in reality, by October, he became the Intercontinental Champion. Triple H, who was slated to win King of the Ring the next month, which instead they gave that to Austin, which led to his infamous Austin 316 promo, wound up getting buried for about 6 months, mostly facing and jobbing to lower card guys during that time. In some ways, it actually wound up being a pretty huge blessing for both him and the WWF. He earned a lot of people's respect for the way he took his punishment, and by the end of the year was getting pushed again, winning the Intercontinental Championship, winning King of the Ring in 97 before forming DX, and on top of that, you add in Steve Austin in there, who most think wouldn't have become what he had it not been for his King of the Ring victory that year in 96. So, now that we got that out of the way, here's my thoughts on the whole thing. It definitely was an interesting moment for sure, but to me that's all revisionist history because it wasn't that important at the time being, because barely anyone talked about it when it happened. Well, I'll take that back. I wouldn't necessarily say no one because it was talked about a lot on the wrestling message boards back then, which for those who were actually there back then may remember the website Falcon's WWF SimpleNet. But yeah, it happened at a house show in New York, and there are a couple of seconds of the video, which was recorded by a fan, and a few pictures of it. So only a few people saw it live. And the only people outside of the house show who became aware of it were the ones reading the newsletters and magazines. And these people knew anyways. It just wasn't treated as if it was this kayfabe-shattering deal, since kayfabe had already died since the steroid scandal. So I don't really understand why some people in the business like McMahon, Cornette, and everyone else treated it as if it was exposing the business when they had already exposed themselves since the early 90s. This didn't really kill kayfabe at all because nobody over a certain age thought wrestling was a real sport in 1996. Like, even when I was in grade school before the internet became widely available, most kids still understood it wasn't real. Never mind the adults, of course. What you have to understand is that the old school guys in the company at the time were brought up in a business decades before where protecting kayfabe was ingrained in them as the most important thing in the world. They were offended by what they saw as a breach of etiquette and insult to the values they were brought up in, when in reality they were just cranky old men yelling at the clouds, but they had enough pull to cause a lot of trouble for one of the guys involved. Which is why Triple H, who at the time being was Hunter Hearst Helmsley, was punished for it and had his King of the Ring victory taken away from him for the sake of Steve Austin. But Triple H's punishment was not that severe, as he was a champion from 4 to 6 months after the incident, and even after all of that was still pushed beyond his popularity for decades, which really goes to show you he's always been privileged from his WWF/E career. But yeah, the curtain call incident is just one of those things that's been mythologized far beyond any actual impact it had. I don't know, I guess Vince McMahon was probably mad more because they were putting over guys leaving more than anything. However, Triple H has been able to turn this tiny little moment that hundreds of people saw as this groundbreaking, super important big deal. And because of that, WWE has taken the narrative to make the curtain call so much bigger than it actually was, simply because it started the Austin 316 era. Hell, even Big Nose over here takes credit for it starting the Attitude Era. Good.
You want to know the moment that the Attitude Era started? To me, it wasn't Austin 316, the saying, or us saying suck it and all that stuff. It was that night, the curtain call. That was the Attitude. That was the beginning of the Attitude, the real Attitude. To me, all of it started at Madison Square Garden.
Which is debatable. I mean, yeah, you can make the argument that the curtain call was a meta turning point because it represented Hall and Nash leaving and the NWO, which changed the wrestling irrevocably. Because without the NWO or Nitro in '96, the business never goes in the direction it ends up going in. But the thing is, it would have happened anyways because Hall and Nash were already leaving. So how does this little moment represent the start of the Attitude Era? Exactly. Fuck you, Triple H. Also, it's not like Austin 316's promo will revolutionize this shit overnight. It was definitely a huge moment for Austin, but it's not like Austin 316 signs just happened overnight. From what I can remember, he stayed in the mid-card for maybe a few months, feuding with guys like Savio Vega, and even jobbing to him a few times. But in my opinion, Steve Austin's popularity really didn't kick in up until he feuded with Bret Hart, which was a really damn good feud and one of my favorites. This to me was what really helped elevate Steve Austin to that next level. And on top of that, you also add in the infamous gun segment with Brian Pillman, which really solidified the direction WWF was already going in. Then you had Steve Austin and Bret Hart's great match at WrestleMania 13. But yeah, regardless if the curtain call happened or not, Steve Austin was going to be a huge star regardless if he won the King of the Ring or not, because Bret Hart would have backed him up the way he backed up The Rock. Especially after hearing stories about The Rock getting bullied by Shawn Michaels and Triple H backstage. But yeah, the curtain call in my opinion only became irrelevant when it was mentioned repeatedly around in '99 or so during Triple H's main event push. Especially the Sunday Night Heat segment before his big match at SummerSlam '99, which he was originally supposed to win, but due to Austin's backstage politics, he'd rather drop the strap to Mankind than just drop it back to Hunter the next night, which made no sense to me. It would have been simple to drop the strap to Hunter at SummerSlam, but they just had to overcomplicate the whole thing, just like the build-up towards the show itself. But I'm getting off topic. The Monday Night Wars wouldn't have been that different. The only argument is how DX would have gone. And would Shawn Michaels have reacted badly and left, etc., etc.? But if HBK leaves, Bret Hart stays, etc., etc. But Triple H was not important to the rise of Austin, Rock, and Foley, and I doubt he would have made a difference to WCW. And like I said, the Austin 316 promo at King of the Ring '96 did not make a difference. Yeah, it sold a lot of t-shirts, but Steve Austin would have said something cool sooner or later. The thing that people get wrong all the time was that it wasn't King of the Ring '96 that got Austin over, because he was already rising fast back then, and they would have had him feud with Bret Hart regardless of King of the Ring. That feud was the key to Austin going from over to super over, and having his legendary rivalry with Vince McMahon. That's what transformed Steve Austin into a megastar, and that's pretty much it. So that's pretty much it for my video. If any of you have anything to add to this, please let me know down below in the comment section. But anyways, fuckers, I'm out of here. Later.